Hey, hello, and howdy. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the live stream that I am trying to model what the beloved and awesome guidance Gary Vee adds to our sphere. And one of the most prescient and excellent pieces of advice that I've ever heard Gary Vaynerchuk say is document, don't create. I mean, you're doing these things constantly. So if you have the ability to document what you're doing as you're doing it, instead of doing it and then later trying to recreate or create, that's always a better use of everyone's time. So I wanted to dig into a mystifying question. So full disclosure, I'm a real estate agent, real estate broker. I own a small brokerage and own a property management company. And I love doing content creation and all that jazz. The point of why I want to dissect today how to safely get a wholesale deal is that there are two different ditches that I commonly see people in, and both of them lead to not safely getting a deal. One ditch is to trust implicitly a wholesaler and to move real fast in that direction. So that's definitely a way to tie up properties. Like, for example, several wholesalers that are big time in our markets of Oklahoma City have a policy of like, you can leave cash on deposit with us and we'll apply it to the deal. And oh, by the way, we have a non-refundable cash deposit requirement. What does non-refundable mean? It means that if you go under contract and that cash is applied to that contract, if you back out, no dice. You're not getting your $3,000 or $5,000 or $1,200 or whatever it happens to be back. And yes, that's really good for them. It also makes sense because of what we're going to talk about in just a second. So that's one ditch. The other ditch is treating it like an on the market in 2019 listing, which would be, hey, we've got to do our due diligence. We've got to work up some things on this. We need to get a good understanding of the scope of work, and we need to move forward on this after having put our ducks in a row. Makes total sense in light of the non-refundable deposits. But the reality with wholesale is any wholesaler worth their salt has built up a buyer's list. Many of them do that before getting into wholesale. So they'll build up a buyer's list before they get properties. Some of them do what I would call the wise thing and get deals, and then the buyers find themselves. But either way, you know that the deal is going out to a probably not small list. And this not small list, let me describe them for you. There are people that are cash buyers, people using hard money loans, or people who are pre-qualified with, like, what are those things? Guidance line loans through banks, which says you can buy up to $2 million that meets this criteria, and here's a checkbook, basically, like, go and buy. So those things flow at about the speed of cash. Cash can move faster. Usually with cash, title work is the limiting factor, but cash and hard money, if the hard money lender is pretty savvy, they can move at about the speed of cash. Lines of credit, functionally, that's cash. But what happens when a Cali-based investor or New York, New Jersey, even now Austin, Denver, when these investors from these high-value markets get an email blast with a property that's $95,000, but the rent potential is $1,400. Man, like, yeah, I'm going to jump on that. Or even better, what if it's $35,000? It's got some damage. You're going to need to fix that. But hey, here's 30 pictures, and the ARV, the after repair value, is $90,000. You can pick up a house for $35,000 that is in any way worth $90,000 when you're done with it. That's awesome, especially if you're looking around at studio apartments that cost $400,000 and up, which would be the case with these high value markets. So when you've got a mailing list that's largely filled with people now, not just in those high value markets, but also in other countries around the world with less stable currencies, less stable economies that are looking to diversify, and they're bringing cash, hard money, and other tools like that, then you're looking at a buyer sphere that's going to pounce. And pouncing is more, it can tend to be in a more maniacal method, not a more prescient, well thought out, disciplined method. Mania always moves fast. Mania is kind of a dramatic word, and so I want to bring it back a little bit to the moderate, but a lot of what we're seeing in the wholesale world and the real estate world is maniacal. It's not logical. It's not based on the risk that's inherent with these properties or with wholesale, but people are moving fast nonetheless. So if you're wanting to safely invest in real estate, what you've got to realize is that joining the mania is not safe. And you can do it, but you need to go in eyes wide open and understand that a wholesaler's not operating in your best interest. They aren't. They don't have licensure that requires that. They don't have a code of ethics that requires that. Many of them don't have a spine or an ethos that requires that. Otherwise, they wouldn't be wholesaling. There are instances where wholesaling is needed. In the vast majority of cases, it's the same as ambulance chasing attorneys. That's an opinion, not a law. But it would be imprudent, many would say, to leave cash on retainer with a wholesaler to tell you what the after repair value would be and what the scope of work would be and what the cost of that scope of work would be. Those are all things that put you bearing all the risk. The wholesaler's not. You are. And if you happen to be out of market, out of state, out of country, you're not going to have eyes on that property. So you're going to be trusting the wholesaler, or you're going to be paying a real estate agent above and beyond the wholesaler's cut, which great. It's just a numbers thing. You don't necessarily need to get all up in your head and be like, well, that's, that makes this not a good deal. It's like, no, just run the numbers and be disciplined about it. But the wholesaler, like the speed that you're going to sacrifice by trying to interface a real estate agent in you're going to do that once. And then you're going to say, oh, it's faster if we just deal directly with the wholesaler. So now back to their scope of work, their cost of rehab, their ARV, their purchase price, and no fiduciary responsibility towards you at all. That's not a great setup. Now, if you are incredibly savvy, if you have the time or the facility set up to automatically run these numbers and to do it in a quick and efficient way so that when a wholesaler sends you something, or maybe it's an area exceedingly well, that's a deal. I can always make it work at that price, or I know that house, I drive by it every day. Well, now you can use some shortcuts to make this a smoother deal, but use your numbers, use your ARV. Absolutely. How many times I see wholesalers come up with ARVs that are exorbitant ARVs. It's ridiculous. Makes sense. It's their bottom line that's determined by the ARV that they publish. So, hey, here's this thing 5 miles away, and here's this other one 2 miles away, and here's a totally different house that's a mile away. So the ARV is 190, and you can get it for 50. That feels like a really good deal. And if you're an Oklahoma City-based investor, you might call bull on that, knowing that nothing in that market sells for that. But if you're from Cali, if you're from Hawaii, if you're from Israel, if you're from India, you're like, wow, that's really cheap. And yes, it is really cheap. And yes, even if you overpay, if you hold it long enough, and if the rent is true, and if it's coming, and you don't have any of these other problems, if you hold it long enough, it will probably work out. But this isn't California. We don't have such massive and aggressive equity jumps through appreciation that it covers a multitude of sins, and it covers overpayment by 20%. It's going to take you years to cover that. And that's not guaranteed. And I think that's something we want to be mindful of. That chasing appreciation to cover overpayment is inherently speculation, not investing. You may get appreciation, but let that be a cherry on top, not the crux of your investment career. Because if it is, you're not an investor. You're a speculator. And that's fine. Many people make money off speculation. Referencing the gold rush, a lot of people lost a bunch of money in speculation, but people made money along the way selling things to speculators. We could argue they were the investors. The landowners that leased out their land to the speculators, they were investors. The people actually digging for gold, they were speculating. So let's not be speculators. Let's not put all of our eggs in the basket of a person who, on average, gets into real estate because they don't have any money, they don't have any deals, they don't have any connections, but they can go door knock. Eek. Not to say that there aren't incredibly skilled in wholesalers out there, but they are few and far between. And if we're all being honest, if their deals were so good, if they understand from an intuitive level real estate investing, why wouldn't they buy them themselves? why wouldn't they partner with people? Why wouldn't they just kick the best or all of them that makes sense to a private network and say, hey, I'll partner 50-50 with you. I'll execute this deal. Like, you would have to be a little bit of an idiot to pass on crazy good deal after crazy good deal. So that's a thing. On the other ditch, trying to treat it like an on market. That is something that is safe, but it's not going to lead to a lot of deals. And here's the reason why. Every time a wholesaler has that deal, they blast it out to people in your area, in the area around it, on the coastal markets and across the world. And any good wholesaler now can put an ad on BiggerPockets, on Facebook, on a dozen different websites, and within a matter of a few days can have a list of 50 to 100 cash buyers from all over the world looking for tons of property. And if you send out an email that has decent pictures, let's say some of the most skilled process wholesalers here have Google Forms that you enter your offer information into. You can leave a cash deposit on retainer with them, and they actually take pictures from around the house. It's like, okay, so if you get a Google Drive with 50 pictures in it and you've got some key information about the property and they already have your cash, so you could literally just fill out the form and they'll auto tie it up for you. Like, that's what's happening on the fringes here. So the idea and the knee-jerk reaction to say, hey, let's do our due diligence before we put an offer, frankly speaking, it's not going to lead to a contract because it will already be gone. And if it's not already gone, I hate to even recommend groupthink here. That said, if it's not already gone, then it means that either this wholesaler doesn't have a buyer's list, and you're like the only person on it, or the buyer's list all got it and passed over it long enough to let you get an inspector in there, a contractor in there, and then formally write up an offer. That's not likely. What's far more likely is that if it's still on the market 3 days later when you got your people through there, or when you took off work to go do it, then it's not a deal worth doing, or there's something undisclosed that people can smell. So that's groupthink. That's detrimental in another way. So, don't holistically rely on that. But it is worth mentioning that if you want to get wholesale deals, there is a nature of risk embracing that has to happen in order for you to be in the dance. And that's why being area specific, focusing on a specific niche or a specific product type can be so prudent and can be so helpful. Because when you look at a property and you need to physically get in it to intuit the value of it, or to intuit the rent value, then you're going to move slowly enough that you're going to miss the deals. Or if you don't miss the deals, like, that's great. There are flukes all the time. That's largely what I've built all my personal investments off of, is flukes that people missed, or people, it was too skinny for them, but it was great for me. So stuff like that, like, those happen. But what you want to build your business around are these scalable, repeatable events, and being masterful on a market niche or an asset class, or, like, if you like 2-1s built between 1930 and 1940 anywhere in the city, like, that's a thing. Like, you might know the exact scope of work that every 2-1 built between 1930 and 1940 needs. And if that's your thing, then you can sift out all the noise and say, hey, that might be a good deal for somebody. It's not my good deal. And so if you can niche down in any way, any creative lens or filter that you can look through, I think that will give you a competitive advantage to stay outside of these ditches. You want to move fast. You want to move faster than treating it like an on-market deal can let you move. But you also don't want to rush maniacally into a foolish situation. Like, hey, yeah, here's my cashier's check. Actually, you know what? Here's $5,000 in cash. And you just keep it. And you tell me honestly what this house is worth when we're done with it, what it'll take to get there. And then you tell me why you're not going to take it, Mr. Wholesaler or Mrs. Wholesaler. Like, it's a ridiculous situation. It happens with agents too. And so you've got to find a situation where interests are aligned and then ride those interests. So anyways, coming back up for air, thanks for walking through this with me. Wholesaling is a valuable niche, and there are some ethical ways to do wholesaling, and I'm completely aware of that. What I'm not aware of is anyone doing it. And I would love to know if you know someone who is wholesaling properties and they're not doing it by misleading an unaware property owner about the real market value of their property. I would love to connect me with them. I would love to do business with an ethical wholesaler that is solving problems and not just getting theirs. In the meantime, be aware. Caveat emptor, buyer beware. Buyer, you need to have the understanding that there are risks inherent in every pathway, and you need to find those areas that allow you to walk in a appropriate, acceptable amount of risk that provides the returns that you're after. Go invest well and have fun in the process.